again, and thanks for joining us for episode 8 of Persians, the podcast. We've come to one of the most dramatic moments in this dramatic play. Aeschylus has already subverted expectations and surprised his audience with a depiction of Queen Atossa and the chorus of Persian elders. Anyone watching the play might have expected that the major dramatic appearance might be the moment when Xerxes arrives home. And instead, after a startlingly noisy, erratic and unique choral passage of shouting and summoning from the underworld, Aeschylus brings on the dead king, Darius. It takes some dramatic nerve for him to decide to flout even death for dramatic effect, particularly since this was a real person who had died only 14 years earlier. The switch that Atossa makes from bringing libations to instructing the chorus to summon a ghost, and then the intense stream of incantations from the chorus, are a remarkable theatrical moment. There are scenes in other tragedies where characters will call out and pray to awesome figures in the heavens, in the ground, or even further below, but unusually, this chorus gets an answer, as Oliver Taplin explains.
This is pretty unusual because it's a powerful figure from the underworld. I mean, quite often you get people calling on powerful figures in the underworld. Like, the children of Agamemnon say, Agamemnon down there in the underworld, help us. But what happens in this is they say, powerful king, who actually hasn't been dead all that long, a bit over 10 years, well, about 10 years, saying, Come and help us. Come and advise us. Come and tell us what the hell's going on. And he does. There's an amazing ghost raising scene, which interestingly, a character in Aristophanes 70 years later or 65 years later say, "Oh yeah, I remember that scene. How great it was when the chorus all cried out to raise the ghost." And he comes and he's full of wisdom. I mean, there is a character that you can't say that Darius is treated triumphantly. He's a character full of wisdom. He's powerful in the underworld. He almost belongs to the kind of heroic age.
Darius, or Darius, was an extraordinary figure, known to all of Athens. He had likewise called for an invasion of Greece, although he had not himself participated, and it was not as spectacular an effort as the one in our play.
It wasn't such a huge, ambitious invasion as the one that's dramatized in this play. But yes, he too was would have conquered Greece if he could have, and yet here he is being treated with awe. He's a kind of awesome figure, really. Again, a quite extraordinary act of imagination.
This amazing act of imagination, this ghost raising, derived, as Edith Hall told us last night, from a Greek rather than a Persian tradition. But there was a literary precedent also, as Oliver describes.
There's a great precedent in the Odyssey, where Odysseus raises the figures from the underworld when he summons up Tiresias and then other dead figures visit him as well. I mean, at the end of it, Darius doesn't come back to life. At the end of it, he goes back to the underworld. Yeah.
Closer to our own tradition, there's also a parallel in Hamlet, which begins with the ghost of the dead king, likewise an awesome ambassador from the past.
There's quite a lot of parallel, actually, with old Hamlet and with Hamlet's father. The same kind of regret, the same kind of wisdom. Different, of course, because he is involved in a revenge play. This isn't a revenge play, but there are analogies there. The same kind of slightly spine-chilling awesomeness about him.
The ghost of King Darius gives 3 great speeches, explaining why this catastrophe has come to pass. First, he addresses the chorus, his faithful comrades and contemporaries. In Nuala's translation, he begins with an Irish phrase that is totally appropriate for such an address, but it also softens it. He says, "Accordia," something like "dear friends." The role of Darius is performed for us by one of our most recognisable, versatile actors, himself blessed with the voice of a king, Owen Rowe. In our own act of theatrical imagination, this scene unites performances from across the country as our makeshift company weaves together multiple microphones and recordings. I hope you'll join us in dreaming of a performance wherein all these terrific actors are on the one stage, and you, our audience, are right there with us.
A cardja díl sin a díl seachta. A hóhé sánig móige. A fyrsi crína. Cadi an vortatá an carrig fullint. Tá an talavig tá sé buelte, tá sé garha. Cor an raik mo vanná tef leis an dóma agle is óvan orm. Glacas gefáiltú le bhór jocan a néfa. Ach tá cíne ag súlagiv. Is sivan bhór seasa vin ag an dóma. Agus sive gléig orm go dearó leg ardú bhór ngahana in olagán dríochta. Tá sé fioiachar héad is a ágand. Agus déthe an daun íchtrich. Is farig tógand siar nó ag scoilig sír iad. Mar sin féin, tis go bhfuil údras agam in a measc táim tagda. Ach brostigi, cunna cuir a milán orma déh an ama a chas. Cad é an tulg nua traum seo atá ag trascud na Persig.
Darius has heard the chorus beating the ground, he says, perhaps another indication from Aeschylus as to how dramatic the ghost-raising ceremony can be. He explains that he's made the very difficult journey back from the underworld, but that even with the authority he has in the afterlife, he can't stay long. The chorus is so awestruck that they can hardly bear to look at him.
Is ábhar agla é rairc a áilart. Is ábhar agla é labhairt leat aig aig. Tá bhar ma hanna agla lót.
Darius explains that he's come because they've summoned him, and so he now encourages them to tell him what has happened.
On orga hangas os na le mysteri eictraga ag fragart roganglena. Not ro ahas gada. Ach lawerlam vuklev gara crin. Agus den gano glan den rud galer. Agus kach uat on tagla atá ard roam.
Tá agla orm rud a dhéanamh ort. Tá agla orm fragara a thuairt. I bhocail go bhfuil sé dacid ag cáirte a labhairt.
Tush go bhfuil cosca cór orbise a hanóirí ag an seanagla atá bhór meabhar. Tusa a bhan rian ma Comhairle lapan. Stop soas des na diora agus des na holagáin agus inis od ag an diar crin. Is é dánan dina déine go darlín tubistí dó. Mar tugan an dina aig bhór an decarecti. Hagan an bhuir is an dalah. Agus tá ad é a cortala de héal. Is seahis mó an dómh.
Back and forth they speak. The chorus is still terrified, giving us a sense of just how powerful and perhaps forbidding Darius was when he was alive. Since the chorus is no help, Darius turns instead to the queen. In her own greatness, she manages to be less emotional than the chorus. She tells her husband she envies him his early death, since it prevented him from witnessing this disaster. The Persians, she says, the destroyers of cities, have been utterly destroyed. Back and forth, the king now asks a series of questions of his beloved queen. Was there a plague, or a civil strife, a war between brothers? Which of his many sons can have led this foolish campaign? How can Xerxes have done such a thing? Did he send the army and the navy? Again, the idea of a vengeful god intent on damaging Persia is woven through their exchanges. All of Susa, all of Bactria, all emptied of men. The king is horrified, Can all of this be true? Yes, the Queen insists, all true. The Persians have acknowledged the existence of Greek gods, particularly Zeus and Poseidon. They are aware of what these gods control. But of course they are, since it is a Greek play written from a Greek perspective. Now Darius explains how Zeus has made all of this come to pass.
Oh, Owen. Nagtabig a Ealaíon na Haricli. The Caitríona the news va Ealaíon the Daringrakti. Vi dokus a gum goduruk na dehe kun krihe iad an megan a vada makansha. Ac nor dinner over on fein. Is only godugan an dia cowardo lesh. And nish is only go hanagas fiorinche na treblodia da gakeni is on winlum. Agus an dinner of win shaw mak na mavak ein lock a diasbak na hoige. An fare cap go vedak she shrinta a cora awing nefe an Hellespont. Ho nefe an Vasfors.
This is all happening as the fulfillment of a series of prophecies. These prophecies and oracles haven't been mentioned anywhere else in the play thus far. Perhaps they happened during Darius's lifetime. They clearly suggest that the Greek victory was ordained by the gods. All of it has been brought about by the audacity of his son, who was brazen enough to treat nature like his slave as he lashed the Hellespont and built his bridge of ships.
Daurig sé ó bhain cruhan cuil, tre slaurí a oisce timpelir, con bóhar mor a haláhar da arm. Cénach willow nach dinna déní, cap sé le méid a héntach da go bhétach sé bucan der na déthe, agus Poseidon in a measc. Ní falláir nó bhí galar éigen Maura ge córa bheor má vic. Is bélam, an mór thiúras illa a crunías trí míreachtaí go léir. Gon éon verslad ag an dinna is tuisce a hagan an tro.
Darius is very angry at his son's arrogance. Xerxes has been foolish to think that he can outwit Poseidon and challenge the gods themselves. The ghost is horrified. All of the wealth that he accrued while he ruled is now worth nothing if they're all dead. Atossa tries to explain how Xerxes was led astray by wicked men. The play doesn't give us much information as to who these wicked men might be, but it sounds a little like an indulgent mother explaining away her son's shockingly arrogant behaviour. There may also have been a political nudge here, suggesting that Xerxes was influenced by Mardonius or by various enemies of Athens. We don't really get much information. The queen almost seems nervous, tight-lipped, since, of course, she's watched Xerxes go off on this crusade.
Dólam Xerxes an tóram sin, ó bheithe cans le drochaoine. Dóradar gur éirí leatsa mórthebhras a chruthó do de chláán le do crógacht. Gur do mhóra aspa do gánaíocht iarúil, gur chaise bheithe imirt ról an gasci sa baile. Agus nár chuir sé éon peach leis an rachmas a dága ahar na dhé. Is tuis gur éasc sé le hachas an den sort sin á chaithimh go rómhinnig ag drochaoine, gur shrimsí sé an bóthar thar an Hellespont a chruthó agus tóirt faoi an achtas ag gcoinne na Gréige.
Now Darius laments how Xerxes has caused something unthinkable, something that has never happened since Zeus, of all gods, ordained the lineage of the Persian Empire. Susa, the great city, is empty of men. Darius goes through the whole litany of rulers, good and bad, but insists to his colleagues and councillors of the chorus that none of those that wielded the Persian sceptre would ever have brought about such suffering.
Agus dábhar sin da chroigh sé rud hód do creite sin. Rudnach nar a dúfar go deá, agus na hála riomh hena full of bhú amach cahar Susa. Níor hála sé seo riomh ó bhrun ón an tíana zéas ar an nua orin go beg fear amháin I gceannas ar an ois omláin. an ois a cohín círe, agus go bhara sé bucail an cóachta. Mar dubé méada sa bhí mar céad ceanara na dtíine, agus ba é bhacan son go éirigh leis an gníomh seo a choirigh riach, mar do thuirigh an diachíle chrí. Ba é an tríú duine sa líne sin na Cyrus, fa go raibh aine rathair. Mar do thugaríil siacán chun a chairde go léir, is go éirigh leis fleachas a áil phobal Lydia, agus Phrygia, agus chur smach der Ionia le láimh láidir. Mar níor chuinnig éon dí a póir in na crinne mar do duine da bhéine é. Ba é mac Cyrus an ceachú ceanara an slua, agus dubé an cúgó rialthór na mardas, a bhí na cúis naire don na hir dúchas, agus don grí caithír arsa. Maria gés a fálas ag atra fréine is úsal. A dénta chuid dá chuirde gurb é an neolgas a héad a dhéanamh. Dub é an séú duine na marafis agus an seachtú na atra féinas, agus an son mise, hit an crownthúr orm mar a hastig gwim, agus de cós bhórán feachta sí mílta le haram mhór, ach níor thug mé riomh sa baiste comóras an an gahar. Is far óga má bhachas arsaid. Go bhfuil smainte óga aige agus na cuinín íon na cóirlí, mar bíocha is a gcuibh a coisániglum. Éine again go raibh an cócht ríoga aige. Ní beidh sé riamh ina úda an irid an fuarangthe.
In the next part of his speech, Darius gives some advice for his people. The chorus asks what he's come to say and how best the Persian people can proceed. He explains that they must never again try to take on Greece because the very soil under their feet is their ally.
Agus an son I hiarne Darius, cad é spruch do chuid cainte. Conas is féidir leis a bobbal perseach an rud is fearr is féidir leis I dhéanamh.
Réon Conhairle bháin, nach dugann sibh ionra bith halamh na gréagach. Fiú mar tá airm na bersach níos mó, mar is cólaí dus na gréigigh an talamh féin.
Cad tá a gceist agat? Conas gur cóthúlaí é.
Má maríonn sé le gorta éon phobal sa bhreis.
Ach an fórsa a bhailómid, bei sé a gceannas fearr, bei sé tofa go cuaramach.
Ní ha, fiú na fórsaí atá inis dul na gréagach, tepig áthú fila a bhfuil isláin.
Cad tá á rá agat? An álaigh nach dras nóig an fórsa barbarach Comhairle heile an órip slán.
The ghost of the king has come from the underworld and learned this terrible news, and has explained how this was always going to happen, especially given the arrogant behaviour of his son. The chorus asks how it can be that the Persian forces left behind in Greece will likewise face disaster, and Darius gives the last of his speeches, a prophecy of what is still to come.
Ba bheag duine as mórán, má swinin tú bhfuil tálathe a chuirigh uin ina ordathe na néithe. Tá hanga go léir I gríoch gan tep, cílíonn sé sin ar a thug Xerxes leistar do chropaí tofa, go raibh sé cortha fánaigh dóchas fulamh. Tá siad ag feitheamh mar a iscín an asipus na macaríle na chrochna, go raibh roich sí talamh bóéise. Búlaigh bar na mí agus na fullinghan san lo, mar chuid tú ar an uair agus a phleanna na nabhgéúla. Nuair a chúda go dtí na gréige ní raibh naire bith orthú I bhána na déthe a gcuid, nó tine a chur leis na teampel. Dimig altório raiarc agus ar díag srínan na néthe ó na maithrice, agus an piag sús sias siad sa thurlam tro. Agus inis fúlan gyd si triblodi gach pioco hulk leis na cín ba chúis lo iad féin. Agus fúlan gyo siad nís mó fós, man il baun fós shriste ag an driblodi, toid fós ag bara aníos. Beg Ebert alúl an oire chalav flatea, Comhairle. Cruathe ag slána dar a cocha. Cilóg na mialta corpán do húla na trí glún in ar dhéag. Na ceart do gcuine bheith ag cuine bheith rudí atá las dús tá stáisiún. Mar blahín an uver agus fás an bartobistí agus winteras an fór olagóin.
This is a terrible prediction. The remaining Persians will be slaughtered at Plataea, and the men will be reduced to piles of corpses that will be spoken of for generations. Twice in this speech, Darius uses the word hubris. This awesome figure, doomed for a certain time to walk the light and tell his people where they went wrong, does not mince his words. This is the apex of the play, where he explains that it is because of Xerxes' hubris and his people's arrogance, equating themselves with the gods of the sea, that they have been so utterly undone. Here's Edith Hall discussing why it was so arrogant of the Persians to take on the Greeks at sea.
The Greeks are the people who own the seas, right? He can have the Persians have got these extraordinary lances stretching all the way to India, and sort of that's okay. The great hubris was flogging the Hellespont, building the bridge over the Hellespont, getting into the water, and trying to have do naval warfare against the Greeks. That was it somehow theologically, he's offended Poseidon. Aeschylus grafts the Persians' failure onto very, very Greek theology about getting out of your place, getting too big for your boots, getting into the wrong element, trying to transcend your allotted portion, which is land, if you're Persians.
Now Darius gives some advice for his people. Do not be greedy, do not lust for what is not yours, and do not anger the gods.
Cuoinig chonasatá na pionóis, agus cuoinig an Athéin agus an Ngréig, agus ná big scorn réine an unid a hugdiadó. Is ná sounding an méid a bhuinean le daoine eile, chun go gaithfidh tú wit rachmas mór. Mar seasan é a sos cionn na meabhair atá uvrach. Agus is brethebh daoine. De bharr seo, úsáid focail cíl víre ráha chun cóirle a chur Xerxes. Chun go do sneoig sé ag níomhiú go meisiúil agus go stoppaigh sé ag chur ilcear na déthe lena bhuí scéal agus lena héasbach harmión.
It now falls to Darius himself to be the one to tell his people to remember Athens. If Aeschylus knew this detail of the king's life, he's woven it very beautifully into the text. The Persians, he says, were foolish to try this undertaking, for Zeus will stand firm against the arrogant. He tells the chorus to be gentle but firm with Xerxes and prevent him from offending the gods again. Next he turns to Atossa and encourages her to look after their son, to go and get fresh clothes for him. Yet again we have a reference to clothes and clothing. The Greeks really were obsessed with how opulent the Persian wardrobe must have been. Darius knows that Xerxes will have torn his clothes to shreds in his anguish, and only Atossa will be able to console him. He says his farewell to the chorus and ends with even more advice. Live happily and live well, since riches are useless to the dead. For a ruler so famous for the extravagant wealth of his empire, it's a remarkable exit line.
Agus tusa, mahar arsa agus unvin Xerxes, terawalja agus feig édi arúnacha do de vach. Agus ter fuine chune. mar tuisc méid a bhróin de bhar na tubaiste. Tá sé tar éis a róbí brínáilte go léir, a strace in amrán gódí. Ciúnig éile focail bhealta, mar tá is a god gur tosa an tain duine a láigh sé éisteach leis. Táim sin is ag file ar an dorchach faoi halamh, a hanóirí farim slánagóid. Tór pléisiúr dornanam gach lá ar a choras. Fiú I gona na nacareachtaí, mar ní héin bha an Severus dus na marad.
With his final farewell, Darius returns to the unknown. It's a brilliant stunt bringing him onto the stage, but there's a surprisingly high level of respect too. If this was supposed to be a triumphalist pageant, letting the Athenians crow about their victory over their silly enemies, this great scene would probably rain on that parade. The wisdom that Darius shares is reasonable. These are good words for any Persian or Greek to live by. Yet again, Aeschylus subverts expectations, keeping the audience on the edge of their seats. We'll attempt to do the same and leave it there, and continue with our story tomorrow evening. Persians, the podcast, is coming to you every evening left within Dublin Theatre Festival, and the project has been made possible by the support of the Arts Council of Ireland. It's written and presented by me, Conor Hanratty, and produced by Maura O'Keefe. Tonight you heard performances by Owen Rowe as Darius, Marie Mullen as Atossa, and Bríd Neachtain and Caitríona Mhurchú as the chorus, with expert contributions from Professors Oliver Taplin and Edith Hall. For more details about the project, built entirely around a new translation of the play by Ealaíon, be sure to visit our website, persiansthepodcast.com. If you're enjoying the show, do be sure to pass it on and tell your friends a chóide, and I hope you'll join us again tomorrow evening. Míle buíochas agus í Hawaii.